So the next section that we're going to talk about is around making my situation safer, which has 4 key areas. Could you tell me a little bit more about what these areas cover?
Okay, so the first thing we'll look at is a suicide plan, and that's as in, you know, have you made a plan as to how you'd end your own life? We then need to look at alcohol and drugs and how these could impact on our ability to stay safe. And then our environment, maybe considering those places, people that might have a more negative impact on us, and we might need to be sort of aware of and look to avoid. And finally, about past history and why it's worth considering this.
So you mentioned there about a suicide plan as being part of the safety planning procedure. Why do we have to consider this as part of our safety plan?
Well, it's essential, isn't it, that our safety plan is practical, and if you thought about how you want to end your own life and you've potentially maybe accessed the means to that, we need to ensure that when you are in crisis, or extreme distress, it's harder to access those means, or at least we need to be looking to how to slow that process down. Because ideally we want to remove the means, or it could be, you know, making it harder to get hold of. So, for example, maybe giving medication to others or asking for smaller prescriptions. But again, it's putting things in the way. So, you know, talking about our reasons for living that we looked at earlier, we could look at putting a reminder of them, maybe, you know, in the car, in the bathroom where we keep our pills, whatever it is, it needs to be practical and it needs to be common sense.
So essentially what we're trying to do is slow down that process of wanting to act upon those thoughts of suicide, really.
Yeah, totally. But I think it's also important to recognise as well that if someone hasn't made a plan as to how they'd end their own life, they still do need a safety plan. You know, as said to begin with, we know we'd recommend that everyone has a safety plan. We need to be ensuring that people who sort of at that maybe sort of stage where they're having thoughts of suicide, they're not going to sort of move along the continuum and act on them. So, you know, it makes sense that sort of we have a safety plan to explore this.
Yes, I did have a suicide plan. I had thoughts of going to the woods and hanging myself, and also I have had thoughts of taking overdoses as well in the past. To keep myself safe, I've removed things from my house, like ropes. I don't have any ropes in the house anymore, and I get my prescriptions on a weekly basis now. That was in discussion with the doctor, so that I didn't have necessarily the means to do something quickly. I'd had to actually think about it and hopefully then break that down and not act. Completing this section of the safety plan has helped me feel more safe, as I don't have the means that were in my plan readily available to me. I would have to actually seek out more medication or a rope or something to use. So I kind of feel safer because it's not readily available.
So drugs and alcohol are included on the safety plan. This seems a little bit out of place on there, but can you tell us why we include this as part of safety planning?
Okay, we know that alcohol and drugs increase our impulsivity. So the more we drink, for example, the more likely we are to act impulsively. So it's really important we consider it here. We need to remember the focus of this plan. It's about keeping ourselves safe from ending our own lives. It's not about our lifestyle expectations. The issue of suicide is the paramount one here. And again, we're the expert in ourselves, really. So we tend to suggest a safe use rather than a no use. It's no point putting that you're sort of not going to touch drugs or alcohol if actually, you know, a pint, glass of wine, whatever it might be that sort of well done to ourselves, or it might be, I don't know, a spliff gets you to sleep at night. But we need to be aware that the more we drink, for example, that there's more risk in acting on those thoughts. So we may need to look to limit the amounts, or no, not to drink alone, for example. I think it's also worth mentioning here that if you're concerned by your drug or alcohol consumption, there are organisations there to support you, and again, looking on our support directory on the website, that they'll sort of, we talk about them there.
It was strange because the night before my suicide, I was in hospital. I was like integrating from hospital to community, and I received a phone call from my best friend, and it was quite upsetting. This was nearly 2 weeks in planning my suicide the night before, and I asked for drink to dampen down my emotions and things. So I had it on my plan that I wasn't allowed to drink again. Even, you know, they were keeping me safe because of the reason why I wanted that drink to dampen down my emotions. I didn't want to deal with anything. So that was they kept me safe from drinking, because if they were my fault, don't want to deal with my emotions at all.
So this is a bit of a biggie for me, this really. So it's obviously from early 20s. So this is where I didn't realise the impact obviously drinking and recreational drugs were. So every time I'd hit personal problems, stresses in my life, the first go-to would be just start drinking, and then the recreational drugs would follow. And it's sort of like an escapism, and it's hard to explain when I talk to somebody. It's always, how do you give up something that's always been there for you? So it's always been there every time I've had stressful times, but then only the short term, it's only helping short term, but then it makes the mental health and the aftermath even more like worse, and like the come down and the mental health afterwards. But still, it's like a trigger. It's always the first go-to I've always done when I've hit stressful situations. It feels like it just numbs the mind and makes you forget everything.
So you mentioned a little bit about environment at the very beginning. This could be certain people, certain places. Is there anything else we need to consider here?
Well, again, it's recognising and having them on our plan, isn't it? You know, certain people, certain places will be particularly triggering. We need to know to avoid them, or at least sort of know to limit our exposure. So, I don't know, examples of places, you know, it could be avoiding the pub, it could be certain walks. You know, if you're, again, we need to be practical. If your plan involves water, for example, you're going to want to probably avoid walks near the coast or not near the lake when you're in crisis. Certain people, they might make us feel more inferior. They might wind us up. So again, knowing when to avoid them. Or it might be certain times when we're best not to be alone, or again, we know that actually certain dates, anniversaries can be really difficult. We need to identify them so we have a strategy really to deal with them.
Into, yeah.
Well, I've just been thinking about it now. Today's a lovely day and happy, waking up, like mornings, like nights, but I'm noticing just recently when it's been dark, cold, wet, it's just I've been depressed and not wanting to leave the house and just feeling down in the dumps, and it's just more sort of like, it's like the frame of mind was already sort of down in the doom and gloom already there, so it just doesn't take much triggers to sort of flare anything up. But it's just like, say, then when the weather's not too good, it's hard to get out doing the normal things you do, like exercising, biking and walking, to try and obviously get your mind away from things. So it's a little bit of a bad time of year, really.
So when I was a teenager, like going into big school, I experienced divorce and death. So that, and going into a new school is a huge change in itself, and I really struggled with that, and I couldn't concentrate. I got bullied quite a lot, so that really affected my mental health.
Because it was near Christmas when I had my suicide plan. It was near Christmas, so I'd wrap presents for people and things like that. I was preparing my family for Christmas, so I actually do not wrap presents now, because I know I wasn't the Mags 10 years ago when I was wrapping them presents, but it's something that still affects me, because I was preparing my family's Christmas with me not included. So that is something for me that does trigger. But my family understand that as well, and they don't want me to kind of go back into that situation. I will try anything, but I think that hits me more. I think that really hits me more, preparing everything for them at Christmas.
So the next section that we need to discuss is about an individual's past history, and this relates to prior suicidal behaviour, perhaps even around self-harm as well. This can be quite confronting for some people, can't it, and quite emotive.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really important, isn't it, that we are really kind to ourselves while we're considering this, because it's not just a tick box exercise. It's not, oh well, I've previously attempted, therefore I'm at more risk. But it's recognition of how our past may have an impact. You know, if you've previously attempted to end your own life before, what have you learned from that experience? What helped at the time? How did you feel from surviving that attempt? Again, all of these can help us stay safe, so really important that we consider. And as you say, it's not just simply about sort of previous suicide experience, it might be about self-harm, suicide bereavement, for example.